I welcome you all to this expert hearing. So we had one yesterday, very interesting thoughts that we were brought to, and now we will continue. We are talking about the power of thought. So this hearing aims to answer key questions like, how does thought affect matter? Or how does it affect the brain and the body? How does thought affect our environment? And has it been observed? What evidence is there that humans can change the world through thought? And very importantly, for us, the members of the parliament, how can we learn to do that? And with the expert hearing yesterday, we are making these experts available to improve our knowledge as we seek to make resolutions about using thought for a more humane world. We are pleased to have the following distinguished experts with us. Professor Roger Nelson, a parapsychologist known for his research at the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab at Princeton University. He studies consciousness, intention, and the role of the mind in the physical world, focusing on numerous communal experiences. We have Professor Amit Goswami, a retired professor of physics from the University of Oregon, USA, and the founder of the quantum activism Visualion, who also calls himself a quantum activist. He's a leading voice globally on the connection between consciousness studies and quantum physics. And he advocates for bridging the gap between science and spirituality. And we have Dr. Christian Schubert, who's the head of the Laboratory for Psychoneuroimmunology, the Medical University of Innsbruck in Austria. He's a leading voice and teacher in Europe for psychoneuroimmunology, all the way that thoughts influence changes in the immune system. Each expert will present their testimonies for 15 minutes and followed up by 5 minutes of questions from the members of the parliament. So if you have a question after the expert has spoken, please press the raise your hand button on the Zoom frame, and I will call you on as time permits. So let's begin as in day one. So we will have consecutive experts. Now I would like to Professor Roger Nelson to take the floor and to give us his presentation. Roger, you're welcome. I remember very well our connection in Biarritz at the ocean in France. So we talked, and I know that you are talking in German as well. So have your floor, please.
Thank you, Volker, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for your participation in this extremely important endeavor to try to teach ourselves, the human race, a little bit more about where we live and how we can best continue our existence here. So the word that I use very often, it's in the title of my project, is global consciousness. It could be, I think, perfectly well said that I'm talking about global thought as well. I'd like to give you a very fast, short presentation on what we've been doing in the Global Consciousness Project. So we have been able to show that when we intend to change the behavior of one of these random number generators, we can show that people are able to do that. And we also have looked at group consciousness where we, for example, go to a concert or to a ritual practice of some sort. And we see that the random number generator is affected also in that situation, even though nobody is trying to change it in a particular way. And these background studies led to thinking about a much larger question, you might say. What about the possibility that there is mass consciousness in the world? And we know that people do come together, sometimes in huge numbers. When Princess Diana was killed in an accident, there was a funeral planned for a few days, a week later. And it was said that on the order of 1 billion or maybe even more people were paying attention somehow to that. So we thought that would be a good test case. And so I asked all of my colleagues and friends in Europe and the US to take data during the day of the funeral. And this is the composite representation of all of these 12 random event generators. They should be independent of each other, and they should not do anything like is what is shown in this graph. The trace of the red trace should be a more or less level trace without any trend. But you see instead a quite strong trend that makes it very different from control data, which are shown in the kind of blue-green color. My kind of intellectual mentor from many years before this time was Teilhard de Chardin, who wrote beautifully about evolution. He said, we think we are the pinnacle of evolution, but there's another stage. Our destiny is to become a noosphere, the mental envelope of the planet above and discontinuous with the biosphere. Basically, you could be saying it's an envelope of thought covering the Earth, just as an atmosphere does, but this is a sphere of thinking. So the question arises, can we visualize something like this, a layer of thought covering the Earth? And I recognize that what this question amounts to is seeking a scientific perspective on a spiritual question. Are we becoming a global mind? Are we becoming a composite thought of all the people on the planet? So we set up an experiment which had the basic hypothesis that attention and emotion, when it's shared by people all around the world, that will create changes in the data that come from our network of random devices. And we built a network that covered the globe in a kind of scattered way. Most of our instruments were placed in the US and Europe, but we also had several in India and further east. My son was a programmer who put together our early software, and he said, you know, what you're doing is creating something like an EEG, but for the planet. Instead of electrodes on a skull, we have these random number generators collecting data around the world. So he said, you could call this an electrogaiagram, like an electroencephalogram, but with Mother Gaia as the object of our interest. The network creates continuous random data from many places. So we have many parallel sequences of random numbers, which constitute a history of data that we can compare with history of events in the world, natural disasters or accidents, terrorist attacks, and also more pleasant things like great celebrations of various kinds. But I would like to show you just a few examples of the kind of the results of this research. In 2001, September 11th, there was the attack in New York and Washington, which we refer to as 9/11. Those attacks correspond with structure in the random data that shouldn't be there. Remember, a truly random data sequence should be just level with variation, but no trend. And you can see that on a date, this is a 9-day period, so the September 11th is right in the middle. The data started changing actually a little bit before that and continued to be different from expectation for about 3 days. A different measure using a different kind of statistic shows even more sharply how strong the deviation was right around the time of those attacks. And in fact, it shows also rather clearly the data started changing before the attack actually occurred. If this were data from a human, we would say that may be an indication of some kind of premonition or precognition. It's not clear, but it may be that a global consciousness could also have premonitions. This is a picture of the tsunami in the Indian Ocean. This is a long time ago, 2004, but probably people still remember it. One of the things that was discovered was that although a large number of people died, no big animals did. They left the beach. They ran away from what was about to happen. On the positive side, we look at New Year's every year. By that, we mean we look at midnight, a few minutes before and a few minutes after. We expected that there would be a decrease in variation and variance while people were coming together to celebrate this abstract moment in time. And the picture on the right shows that the data do drop down to in a fairly striking way, and then rise again after the moment of midnight has passed. This one will be closer to home to many of you. There is the Kumbh Mela, which is an occasion when tens of millions, maybe even larger numbers, come to bathe away their sins in the waters of the Ganges. And we have looked at this 4 times over the period that we've been running this network. And we see a somewhat similar kind of trend away from the expected during the day of Kumbh Mela. And if we put all those together, what we're doing is creating a set of replications. The composite value, looking at the data across all these replications, is really very persuasive. Only once in 1,000 times would we see such a deviation by chance. And we can say that's the same thing about the experiment as a whole. We ran a formal experiment over a period of 17 years and 500 events, each one carefully specified, completely controlled. And we find that putting them all together, even though some are backwards, some don't show much of a deviation, the tendency is for them to deviate in the way we predict, and the accumulated deviation is very impressive in statistical terms. It's what in physics would be called 7 sigma result, meaning we should pay attention. The odds against chance of having so much deviation over this large number of replications is on the order of 3 trillion to 1 against being merely chance fluctuation. People justifiably wonder about controls, and we do that in the case of the Global Consciousness Project by running simulations. I want to quickly mention a few other things that we've learned. That strong result allows us to break up the data into categories. So we ask, for example, what's the effect of a larger number of people being engaged in the event? And what we find is that the more people, the larger the effect that we will see. Here's one that we didn't think of it originally, but it's rather sensible after all. And what we did was to determine when during the day the effect sizes were largest. And by the day, I mean, when are we awake or are we asleep? And it turns out that the strongest effects are around dinner time. We're very much awake, and that's 1800 hours. And they're weakest in the middle of the night, in 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning. The strength of the emotions that are aroused in the event is a very important factor. If it is not a strong, high level of emotion, the effects are pretty much almost non-existent. They're just average effect sizes. And this is my favorite finding of when pulling the data apart and looking at categories. If we ask what's the major emotional element, what we find is that if an event embodies or evokes high levels of compassion, we can reliably expect it to produce an effect. The high versus low levels of compassion produce a very highly significant difference. So these are the kinds of interpretations and implications I believe are particularly relevant to the power of thought. Thought or consciousness has a presence in the world. It's not an abstract thing. It's a real element in the world. Consciousness is extended and it's non-local. The devices that we're looking at in this network are separated from each other by hundreds or thousands of kilometers, and also from what we might say is the event, except that the event is in a kind of consciousness space, and that is a non-local space in physics terms. We think that the data indicate that we humans are interconnected at a deep level. I'll talk a little more about that. Our minds touch the world. We actually change the world very slightly in the instrumentation that we use for this project. We believe that the evidence suggests also that when we come together, when we cooperate and intend the same thing, that will have consequences. When we're coherent, we create a noosphere. And I think ultimately we can accept the idea of oneness, which is something spoken of by all the sages and saints of since the beginning of our consciousness. So
we are running a bit out of time, so would you mind to
okay
to the end?
I think that if we make our unconscious connections conscious, we will be on the way to having what amounts to conscious evolution. And I love this quote, so I'll take just a moment to read it. Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love, and then for a second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this excellent presentation and this many thoughtful ideas that you brought to us. And I would like to ask the members of the parliament to ask the questions. So Christoph Dumas has raised his hand. Please, Christoph.
So thank you, Roger, for this very interesting and powerful presentation. So just I was wondering myself, because yesterday we said that thought actually has two components. One is electrical component and the second is magnetic component. So you're talking about the noosphere and said that actually what you are doing, it is an EEG of the planet Earth. And the magnetic field is very known on the Earth, but right now the scientists have just talked about the electrical field of the Earth. And the electrical field of the Earth is in atmosphere, and it is a very weak field. It is 60 microvolt per meter, so it is very weak. So actually it means that it is just like if the planet Earth itself has its own thoughts and its own emotion, so it is just like a living being. And we can see that, for example, in the tsunami, it starts just before, just like if the emotion of the earth is changing, and it creates, just like above to be creates the earthquake, which starts the tsunami. So I just wanted to have your opinion about that. What do you think about that? Can we see the earth like a living being?
Yeah, when I don't claim to be a theorist, but I believe that in some very important way, thought is more basic, or consciousness is more basic than the physical world. And so I think it's quite reasonable for us to look at the possibility that our world, all that we know and see, arises out of thought.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So the next who raised his hand is Rihu Ramadas. Please, Rihu Ramadas.
So I would like to ask a question in relation to this global consciousness. In relation to global or mass consciousness, you have cited some examples of the accident of Princess Diana, and also about the 9/11 issue in Washington, tsunami, and also the Kumbh Mela festivals. These are all mass consciousness in relation to, on the one hand, it is the media creation so that we are aware of this more. And also people like Diana, we love her more. So we are more conscious of those issues. Similarly, Kumbh Mela festival in India is very well known. Thousands of people, it is connected to religion more than mass consciousness. My question is from the positive side, when we look at this mass consciousness we cannot see on certain issues, like, for example, I will quote the poverty, which is faced by a large number of people in Africa, for example, or the current war which is going on between Israel and Palestine, where many people, especially women and children, are being killed every day. And also, for example, currently we are facing one of the issues is climate change. To mitigate the climate change, we find it very difficult to share the resources from developed countries and all. So from the positive side, why not this mass consciousness is not being attracted or being created? This is my question. Thank you.
We have answers only for the questions that we ask, and I think you're suggesting that there are many questions we could have asked and but did not. My guess is that had we the wisdom to know all the things, the major events bringing people together, and asked about that, and indeed it's possible to go back. The data still exists. You could go back to any kind of event and ask whether it shows up in the data. So let me just say one more thing. We know from an analysis of Dr. Dean Radin that if you look carefully at the data, there are indications of some kind of change that should not happen to random data all through the database, from the beginning to the end. So that's probably ripples showing up in the data in response to these other kinds of major events in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. So we will have time only for one more question, which is the question of Beate, who raised her hand. The other ones who have still questions, please write your questions into the chat, so we will continue in the chat to answer them. Beate, your floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I have a very unique connection and very unique conversations with my husband, who passed away about 6 years ago. And one of the most significant things he passed down to me is there is this vast abundance of opportunities, and that which you choose is what you live. And this confirms in a very nice way Teilhard de Chardin's thesis of the envelope above, which I share. And So my question is to you, Nelson, Roger, is there any approach in your institute to do some research in this direction to look into how we could, I don't know how to say, how we can tap into this vast abundance, to utilize this vast abundance before thought occurs, to utilize the most loving thought, maybe.
Well, number one, I agree. There is a vast potential. We probably, when we think about it, we all know that there's a vast potential in each of us that could be developed if we were more conscious, if we applied thought in a more powerful way. As to the ability to create experiments in the laboratory or kind of scientific realm, that's not so easy unless we have a target in mind. You know, a particular kind of question is easier to answer than one that's very general. But I'm happy to say that there is a new version of the Global Consciousness Project. It's called GCP 2.0. And it's very well underway, under development now, and it will be a much bigger network. And also it will have a wider range of questions being asked. And one of the things that we believe is important is to connect more closely, understand better the connection between emotion or the heart and the thought in our minds. So that's one of the driving parts of the new project, GCP 2.0. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger, for shedding light on this very profound aspect of thought, the global effects of thoughts. Thank you very much. And we will now have time for more questions. So George and Dr. Yajwan, please type your questions into the chat so we can continue in the background. And Swami Isa, you would like to say something, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for your kind explanation about the global consciousness, the mass consciousness. We are discussing about the thought. Is a mass thought or mass consciousness? That's one to. Is a mass thought impact or consciousness? Actually, what we mean in the term, the consciousness, is awareness or beyond that. Actually, thought, inside the thought, that is inside the vibration. Everything inside the vibration, the thought and everything the byproduct of energy. Energy is the vibration. We are inside the thought. We are inside the vibration.
Yes.
Inside the vibration means now we are assessing the mass thought awareness. It's a small, it is a quantity of people. The less people is aware about, and mass people also aware. That is awareness, not consciousness. Consciousness beyond that. When the energy going to stop, or non-vibrating energy called consciousness. Vibrating consciousness called energy. We are the byproduct of vibrating consciousness. We are the byproduct of vibrating consciousness. That is energy. One form of energy is thought. Awareness is mass awareness. That's global awareness. So only this term want to clarify. That's only so when this time.
Yes. I can only say yes, exactly.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Roger. Well done. So we will proceed with our next expert, which is Professor Amit Goswami. As I said, he's a leading voice globally, and as we say, an old hand on the connection between consciousness studies and quantum physics. So, Professor Goswami, may I invite you? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very quickly, since the subject is the power of thought, the way quantum physics looks at it is pretty much close to how Indian Vedanta and the great masters like Buddha, Jesus, and others, Lao Tzu, Socrates, they thought of consciousness. We have to go back like thousands of years, but this is the kind of thought, revolutionary thought, radical thought, whatever you want to see it as, that gives us the right picture to think of consciousness. It's not energy, it's not anything that you can give any word for. It's the primal source of everything that is. A oneness is a good description. Consciousness is the ground of being. This is the way we formulate it in physics, in which matter and non-matter both exist as possibilities for consciousness to choose from. When we choose, we generate all the different experiences. Now, interestingly, both the Vedanta and the Kabbalah, the Jewish metaphysics, formulated the idea that we don't have just one kind of experience, or if you allow, today we think of experiences as sensing and thinking. That's what material science, scientific materialism allows us. But the Upanishads and the Kabbalah already, this is thousands of years ago, discovered, which every human being can, is that we have more. Out of the more 5 kinds that they said, out of the 5 kinds, thinking, we still recognize. Feelings of vital energy, this is where the concept is quite appropriate, but not physical energy. It's energy connected with living process, vital energy. So it's physical, vital, only quantum physics can describe such movements, and then mental. And mental kind of experience. Mental is the objects of mental, again, not energy. The energy is physical concept, not vital concept, but mental movement is movement of meaning. This is something that new enters in our capacity, but everybody knows that which one facet of meaning, when we put the full ambiguity of what we say, then the concept is meaning. So thoughts are about meaning, are objects of meaning. And then the 4th experience is the interesting one. The previous speaker gave a wonderful speech. What is mainly talking about is above the mental. This is the sphere of intuition. Traditions have referred to this as beyond the noosphere. Noosphere is the thought. But beyond that, he just called it heaven, the representation of heaven on earth. And intuition brings us this heaven on earth, archetypes, that Plato called archetypes. Archetypes are the objects of intuition. Archetypes gives us the context of higher thinking and higher feeling. Higher meaning what? Higher meaning and thinking that lifts us in consciousness to higher consciousness. Ordinary consciousness is contracted, ego. Higher consciousness is inclusive, has more of that ground of being sense, unity of everything sense. So when I'm in higher consciousness, I can love you. So what are the archetypes? Things that expand our consciousness: love, beauty, justice, truth, wholeness, that kind of thing. And then we have the last experience we have is the experience of the self, that I am the experiencer. That's the I experience. I see you. You are the object, I am the subject of the experience. And that is direct representation, direct embodiment of consciousness in our brain. Not only in the brain, as well in the heart and navel chakra, that's another place, the digestive organs. These are all places where the experience of I can occur. This is a very recent discovery of quantum physics and also directly verified by scientific data. So once we realize this complete story and realize that quantum physics allows us not only consciousness, the idea that consciousness is the ground of being that chooses from quantum possibilities the actual world of experience, then many of our misconceptions disappear. This connection that the previous speaker was talking about, he already used the non-local, that's wonderful, it comes from quantum physics. This is the description of the kind of connection we are talking about. It's not local connection. Local connection is through local signals, connections with signals. This connection, non-local connection, is connection without signals. How can it occur in space and time? Violating the theory of relativity? It can't. And it doesn't. Quantum physics, this is the new thing about quantum physics. How does non-local communication occur? Through another domain of reality that transcends the domain of space and time. This is where quantum physics becomes radical and connected to depth psychology. Sigmund Freud proposed the idea of unconscious at the end of 19th century, just around 1900. And that is the crucial discovery of psychology. We not only have conscious existence, we also have unconscious existence. Existence precedes awareness. Awareness is the conscious experience, subject-object split experience. Beyond that is the consciousness without awareness, without the subject-object split, as one of the questioners made it clear. And this is what Freud meant by unconscious, and then Jung introduced the idea of collective unconscious, which is beyond the Freudian locally connected unconscious, which only applies to the person, human person. It's locally connected because it's due to our memory that we create in our personal history, in our brain. But the collective unconscious about mankind's collective memory, how does that happen? This is the mystery that we have to follow through to discover what's going to happen in the future, to discover the real power of thought, but not rational thinking the way we talk about usually of thought, but non-rational, intuitive thinking. This is the power that the previous speaker was really referring to. We already had that power once. Collective unconscious, the idea was discovered by Jung in 1916. It's still debated. The hard science is still debated. In psychology, but personal psychology, depth psychology, it's an accepted concept because there's just myriad evidences of this concept. You can dream and we see big dreams with images that are collective images, gods and goddesses. Wolfgang Pauli was one of the most famous quantum physicists, one of the creators. This Wolfgang Pauli went to Carl Jung with a dream. Now, this is a Westerner, a German-born physicist, very high intellectual. In his time, he was called the most intelligent physicist in the world. Imagine that. And this man goes to Carl Jung because a dream was bothering him. What is the dream? He dreamt of a picture of a goddess that Jung immediately recognized is Kuan Yin, a Chinese goddess of compassion. Imagine that. An image from the Chinese culture, according to a man brought up in Europe and never really had any exposure to Chinese history, especially spiritual history. And this man saw this dream, it bothered him so much that he needed a psychologist to put his mind straight. Non-locality, yes. Collective unconscious, yes. Available to all humankind, yes. But of course, if you're born in the West, you don't see images usually of the East, you see images of the Greek gods and goddesses. A psychologist, Jean Shinoda-Bolen, has written a beautiful book, Goddesses in Every Woman, and another one, Gods in Every Man. If you have any doubts, you can see, look at the plenty of data of this in their books. And of course, if an Indian person sees a dream, it's unlikely he would say a Greek goddess. Instead, he would say a Hindu goddess. Durga or Lakshmi are more apt to appear in an Indian's dream. And that's the way it works. That's the way it works. A Chinese sees in the dream Buddha, but it looks like a Chinese Buddha. As you know, if you've been to a Chinese restaurant, yes, there are Buddhas, laughing Buddhas, wonderful figures, but they're all Chinese. Why? Because that's the face that they see. So every culture has the different figures. The figures are not exactly the same. You have to go beyond the figures, look at the archetype behind the picture in order to get the idea that it really is humankind's collective memory. The individual pictures that we see depends on the culture, because the memory was made by individual groups of the culture, and then they got mixed up by a phenomenon called reincarnation, which also quantum physics explains as humankind's non-local memory. In the case of reincarnation, it's individual memory that can only pass on to individual memories of future incarnations of the same person. In the case of humankind's collective memory, it goes from entire humanity to next generation to next generation to next generation by the same mechanism. Same mechanism, propagation of non-local memory. So this way of explaining gives us a second way of hereditary transfer of information. Darwinism, transfer through genes, it's a material transfer of information. Indeed, that's the way it occurs in evolution, certainly, but evolution has a complex problem as well. It's not just simple Darwinism. There is a theory called Lamarckism, how acquired characteristics also travel from one generation to another, to another, to another. What is relatively unknown to people is that Lamarckian evolution now can be explained with quantum physics in terms of this non-local memory, different kind of propagation of hereditary propagation of information through this kind of thing that I'm talking about, collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious, when did that come about? When you do the historical analysis, which I have done, the book is just being published, called The Ascent of Humanity, and I have shown that indeed the discovery by humanity or development of the collective unconscious by humanity, this happened in an era that actually was proposed by Sri Aurobindo, who had a very similar theory to Adi-Shardam. And in this theory, it's more explanatory. Actually, Aurobindo explained the different ages at which we can identify an anthropological era. For example, hunter-gatherers era, everybody knows, Aurobindo calls it the era of the physical mind. Mind gave meaning to the physical. And then comes the vital mind. Now, anthropologists previously had only the idea of hunter-gatherers, and then came agriculture, discovery of plow. But now, new data clearly shows that human beings have erected pyramids as early as 27,000 years ago. Agriculture was discovered no earlier than about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, plow. And so before the plow, there must have been other instruments of agriculture, like a hoe, like a spade, with which there was a garden agriculture. It is this era in which there was the collective unconscious that Carl Jung formulated. Why am I talking about this? Because of that non-local connectivity. How could collective memory be formed? Because people were connected together in that era. Now imagine this is like 12,000 years ago, or more than 12,000 years, somewhere between that, probably 7,000 to 27,000 years ago, we lived in this garden agricultural society in which we were connected. Connected through what? Aurobindo says connected to the vital mind. When mind gave meaning to our feelings, namely it was the era of positive emotions. So what the lesson from all this? The reason I'm talking about, I noticed that my time is up, so I will end very quickly. But this last comment, which is that the era of rational mind actually is taking us backward. As you know, we are actually going somewhat backward in civilization. Everywhere we have even lost civility. Many countries are struggling with democracy, including United States of America, where the election just took place. So what is going on is that rational mind cannot connect. All those data that the previous speaker was showing, they were momentary connections. Yes, we can momentarily connect non-locally. That has been demonstrated by direct experiments by Dean Radin and Jacobo Greenberg and so forth. Many experiments exist of that kind, but that's momentary. Not enough to make a non-local memory, a new collective unconscious for humanity. For that, we need to get to the next level, intuitive mind. And that was what Aurobindo predicted. But it's not easy to see our path from today, where we are very divided. Rational mind does that to us. Even emotions are almost forgotten. In America, even women are not emoting anymore. Everybody is just thinking, rational thinking. And then we are stuck. So from here, how to go there is the work that's to be done. How to find from the rational mind to the intuitive mind. Now, of course, this is where quantum physics can help us, because we have ideas of creativity, inner creativity, we now know the process, but it will require a lot of transformation on the part of humanity. And this is where I hope we all agree in this conference that, yes, it is coming, it's very hopeful, but it will probably take hundreds of years, because transformation isn't easy. It requires a lot of work, a lot of creativity, a lot of meditation, a lot of quantum leaps, but eventually, yes, it will happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Goswami, for your presentation. So I'd like to open the floor for the members of parliament and the ministers to ask their questions. Dr. Rajeshwari, is this hand from the last presentation or still active? If it's active, then just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Very good afternoon or morning, Swamiji Pranam. And my name, Professor Dr. Rajeshwari. Here, a very thought-provoking presentation. And I have seen that we all know that the consciousness, it is a vast ocean. With our ordinary awakening consciousness being just the surface layer, beneath this surface, there is a deeper level of consciousness, including super consciousness, and what you said is correct. Then many philosophers and many scholars, they have also defined this consciousness. Even Freud has his own definition on different consciousness, and that all we know. And the expansion can be achieved, or this one, this expansion from consciousness in the surface to the deeper consciousness can be achieved through various spiritual practices that all we all will approve that, including meditation, yoga, self-inquiry, and some other practices. Then we have to relate, but everything we have to relate it to the nature of reality. We all have to relate everything to reality and their own place within it. So how it is possible? You have also mentioned about the different religious aspects and also related to culture. How we are able to relate true nature of reality and their own place within it, sir.
Yeah, this is where quantum physics comes in. Quantum physics tells us clearly when we study the submicroscopic objects like electrons, photons, protons, neutrons, etc., we find that they don't obey Newtonian physics. They obey a new kind of physics where objects become possibilities. And then the question is, how do these possibilities become actualities of our experience? And there, John von Neumann, one of the great mathematicians of the era, he proved a very important theorem that no material interactions can convert these possibilities into actual events of experience. This is crucial. This is when non-material enters physics. We have to have a non-material, something non-material agency that converts the possibilities into actualities. And von Neumann himself suggested it must be consciousness. Originally, he thought it's individual consciousness, and I suggested, I proved in 1990, 1989, going on, that it is actually consciousness as the ground of being, which can remove all the paradoxes. Otherwise, you get paradoxes. So that work was published in 1993 as a book called Self-Aware Universe. You can read it up, and it's all explained there. That's the connection of science with spiritual. Yes, you're right. I mean, one has to connect to the scientific reality as well, but the connection is very clear in quantum physics. The details we don't have time to go into. You know, this conference is very cramped, so I'll have to stop there. But you can read up that or subsequent books where this is explained amply. Okay, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there's time for one more question, and the last final question comes from George Marquez. So please, the floor is yours, George.
Okay, thank you, Amit Goswami, for your very interesting and impressive talk on consciousness. You mentioned that collective unconsciousness has some correlation with Jung theory. And I'm, in fact, very much excited to hear that. My question is whether this collective unconsciousness is a unique state of superimposed states from which each individual can draw in the sense measure, quantum mechanically, his own or her own consciousness, which leads into reality. I hope it is clear to you whether the collective unconscious state is a unique state of superimposed states from which each individual can draw or measure quantum mechanically his or her own consciousness, which may lead into reality. This all.
Unconscious, collective unconscious, in the way that quantum physics describes it, is humankind's collective memory. Yes, we can all recall it. This unconscious collective memory consists of, in quantum description, quantum possibilities that we can also invoke, because that is in our collective memory. It's not stored in the brain, but in the domain outside of space and time that we call in quantum physics domain of potentiality. but it's the same concept as the unconscious. So you have to change some of the language and adjust the languages. And the language of the language in which the unconscious is written, that language is the language that Jung called archetypes. It's an old word, Plato also used the same word, but it basically denotes the human values that define human consciousness, higher human consciousness. So if you understand this way, then we both would agree that, yeah, we are talking about the same thing. But the language is somewhat different. That's to be expected. One is the psychological language and the other is the physics language. Okay? Thank you. Great question.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Goswami, for answering the questions. And now we come to our next and final expert, Dr. Christian Schubert. As I said, he is the leading voice and teacher in Europe for psychoneuroimmunology, which is a very young science. And so I would like to invite you, Professor Schubert, to take the floor and give us the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, reductive materialism has a firm grip on Western culture, including medicine. Reductive materialism may have done a lot of good for technical progress in medicine, no doubt about that, but the human being has increasingly been pushed into the background. Reductive materialism in school medicine is wrong, and we have epistemological errors in school medicine, which on the one side is positive because it's based on a technical progress of medicine we are all happy to have, but on the other side, the human being is lost in techniques, in materialism, and we have again epistemological errors like the dualism. The dualism separates body from mind and soul, and not just that, it separates body from social, from spiritualism, from culture, from everything outside the matter. Reductionism on the next is reducing people to their material building blocks, their matter. Reductionists think that everything is built up on matter and there's nothing else than material. Objectivism only sees truth in the objective. The subjective is fought against, and so on. So we have a lot of epistemological errors in the reductive or ontological materialism. And I think we have to change now. We have to go to a new paradigm. And this new paradigm, the holistic paradigm in medicine, could be the biopsychosocial paradigm. Please, next slide. And this biopsychosocial paradigm has existed in medicine since the mid-1970s, but it has been slow to catch on. Here, all areas in the biopsychosocial paradigm or model by George Engel, all areas of human organism are inextricably or inseparably bound and linked, and more complex aspects such as social, spiritual, or mental are seen as more decisive than material, physical aspects when it comes to the question of what makes us ill and what heals us. And psychoneuroimmunology, in short PNI, is regarded as the empirical realization of the biopsychosocial approach in medicine. So PNI examines the complex relationship between the social, psyche, nervous system, and immune system, to name a few of many, many, many myriads of different subsystems of the human organism on the one side, and more complex aspects like social, cultural, and biospherical. So here you can see a longitudinal section through the human brain. And we can start on the left and the upper region. And in PNI, psychological stress is seen as a result of the interplay of conscious thoughts, emotions, and willingness to act on the one side, but also of unconscious attitudes and beliefs that have been passed down through generations. So stress can be triggered by social events that are currently occurring, e.g. an argument in an emotionally meaningful relationship, but can also be linked to something or to sometimes severe early childhood trauma. And when we are stressed, the sympathetic nerve system, please press forward, and you see the connection that when we are stressed, a part of the vegetative nerve system, the sympathetic nerve system, is activated, among other things. And next, yes, so this sympathetic nerve system stimulates now the activation of inflammatory proteins in immune cells, which form a first line of defense against infections and wounds. Press. Yes, here we are. So we have a connection from the psychological experience of threatening and stress. It goes to the sympatheticus and then to the immune cells, and let the immune cells release inflammatory molecules. Inflammation is good on the one side because inflammation is the first wall against infection and wounds. However, it is also dangerous for our health. So the organism has integrated regulation system where inflammation regulates itself via central nerve system. Please, the next. Yes, this is a change in immune system from cellular immune system up and humoral immune system down. Next. Yeah. So we have a reflex going on in our body when we are acutely stressed and have inflammation as a result. And the nervus vagus, the parasympathetic nerve system, is activated via inflammatory activity in the body. It gives the information to the brain, and next, the brain now inhibits via the efference of the parasympathetic nerve system, the immune system. So we have a decrease in inflammation after activation of the nervus vagus. However, we are also protected by the cortisol system. So please press. The inflammation activates the hypothalamic system. Press, please. And the hypothalamic system from central to peripheral activates in the adrenal cortisol release, and cortisol is decreasing, next, decreasing the inflammation. So we have the nervous system, we have the endocrine system, which all protects us from too much inflammation, stress-induced inflammation in the body. And then next, there is a shift from TH1, this is the cellular immune system. The cellular immune system inflammation is now decreasing, and the humoral system, the humoral immune system, is increasing. Next. So this is the situation in a acute stress. However, when we are chronically stressed, for example, we have chronic arguments in our meaningful relationships, or we are in panic and anxiety. Think of the past pandemic, the corona pandemic. Cortisol is increased in the body in a chronic matter. And then, please press. We are prone to get sick. For example, we are prone to get allergies, or, and this is very important with regard to the corona pandemic, please press. You see, when we are chronically stressed by panic or anxiety and so on, we have an increased probability to get infection. So SARS-CoV-2 infection, COVID infection, or even cancer. Next slide, please. There are a number of studies in P&I which investigated the impact of interventions, psychological, psychosocial interventions on immune system. For example, psychotherapy, hypnosis, suggestive and imaginative therapies, or relaxation, And, which is important in this panel, I think, very important, is that we know a lot of the impact of mindfulness stress reduction and PNI. So Black and Slavich, for example, have published a systematic review on the impact of mindfulness-based stress reduction by John Sabatkin and the impact of this MBSR technique on immune system. And you can see that it significantly reduces inflammation in the body. It significantly enhances cell-mediated immune system, and it slows down biological aging. So mindfulness-based stress reduction, consisting of yoga techniques, of problem-solving techniques, of relaxation, is able to to positively influence the immune system. However, there are a lot of questions not solved by the conventional research paradigm, the randomized control trial design, the RCT design, which is the gold standard of the materialistic medical research. And so what we did in the past is we developed a new research design in Innsbruck. We call it the integrative single case study. Please, next slide. And the integrative single case design focus on the individual. So no averaging of data across individuals via their RCT design, but focusing on the individual, on the dynamics and the meaning in which individuals are embedded in their psychosocial reality. We call these studies also life as it is lived studies, because we observe people in their life and investigate and study them by connecting biological, psychological, and social systems parameters. So what we ask our individuals, our cases, is that we ask them, please collect your whole urine over a relatively long period of 1 or even 2 months in 12-hour intervals. So collect your urine from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening, and then you can aliquot your urine in small tubes, and these tubes are then frozen in a -20-degree freezer. And then from 8 in the evening to 8 in the morning, you again collect your whole entire urine. And in the morning, again, you have to aliquot the urine into small tubes. So we have at the end of this study a time series of urine samples in which we can measure a lot of stress system parameters and immune parameters, for example, cortisol or neopterin, interleukin-6, and so on and so on. However, we are, of course, interested in the biopsychosocial dynamics of individuals. So we ask our probants also not just to sample and collect the urine, but also to let them fill out questionnaires in 12-hour intervals. So in the morning at 8, they fill out questionnaires on emotional states, thoughts, of course, social activities, physical activity, nutrition, sleep behavior, and so on. And we let them fill out a sheet where they note what has happened in the last 12 hours in a social sense. So what emotionally meaningful everyday incidents they experienced in the last 12 hours. And they are at home. They do the research at home in their life as is lived conditions, but we see them just once per week in the clinic. So they come with a freezer, with their frozen urine samples, with their questionnaires, with their fill out, and we ask them, we conduct an interview with them, a very careful. We ask them what happened in the last 7 days in the 12-hour units of their existence. What happened there? In a positive sense, so what were the positive emotionally meaningful incidents they experienced, but also, of course, the negative, threatening, stressful experiences they had in the previous week. So we do that 4 times in a month. So every week we conduct with them an interview, and at the end of this study, we have time series on the biological level, on the psychological level, think of the questionnaires, and even on the social level, because every 12 hours we know what happened in their life, and we can rate these incidents with regard to their meaning and their significance in the life of the proband. And then next step is evaluation of these data, and we statistically analyze these time series in their connection to each other. Next slide, please. And I give you an example, a case description. A 49-year-old married woman with 3 children. She's a physiotherapist, and she suffers from chronic fatigue and depression. And she suffers from chronic fatigue and depression because she experienced a traumatic diagnosis, a cancer diagnosis, 5 years before beginning our study. And she had a very strong primary therapy consisting of mastectomy, lymphectomy, radiation, chemotherapy. So the whole equipment of the materialistic school medicine. And she got also an adjuvant, the tamoxifen, and she had she was experienced in psychotherapy for 3 years. And then again, she entered our study, sampled her urine, her psychological data, and her social data over a period of 1 month, 28 days, or 57 12-hour units. Next slide. And here you can see the time series of neopterin. Neopterin is a inflammatory molecule in the cellular immune parameter, which is connected to the activity of macrophages. So innate immune system. It's a very good indicator and parameter of the inflammation, and you see it's very varying over the period of 57 12-hour time points. And what we get a lot of information about her life as it is lived during the study. And of course, we also get information on what she did during the study. We did not know at the beginning of the study that she is doing complementary and alternative medicine to have a kind of self-healing process. And you can see the symbols in the 12-hour unit. So she did.
And may I ask you to mind the time, please?
Yeah, I do. So you see the symbols of Jinjinjutsu, music, Tai Chi, energetic healing. And we now cross-correlated these techniques with the inflammatory system. Next slide, please. And you see a cross-correlational result, so that whenever she did these complementary and alternative medicine during the study period, her inflammation first went up within 12 hours and then decreased significantly after 36 hours. So this is a self-healing process. The next slide is showing a breast cancer marker, 8-OHDG. And this is the time series during this study. And next slide, we cross-correlated these breast cancer markers with the complementary and alternative medicine techniques. And what you can see is that whenever she did these CAM techniques, her breast cancer marker first increased 12 hours before she did the intervention, not significantly. However, then, again, in a cyclic nonlinear process, her breast cancer marker decreased 120 hours after doing the complementary and alternative medicine techniques. Next slide, I come to the end of my talk. Reductive materialism is the wrong approach to people in medicine, in education, in everything in our westernized culture. The need for paradigmatic change in medicine and Western culture is absolutely necessary. Thoughts are inseparably bound to emotions, immune activity, unconsciousness, etc. P&I is an empirical realization of the biopsychosocial paradigm, the new holistic paradigm in medicine, and complexity research in medicine needs alternative research designs. Thank you very much for your attention and interest.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We would like to continue in listening to you for hours. Of course, it's a very interesting thing, and you are creating a new way. So this integrative single case design is what we need. So we don't need a statistics for everybody, 10,000 cases, N is 10,000, we need N is 1. And that's perfect. Thank you very much. So if there's an urgent question, you may raise your hand. Guido Henri de Coupé.
I was very interested in what you were telling, and I'm very glad to see that some more holistic approach is coming. But some years ago, I was on a colloquium and with medicine people as well. And they said at that time, all our complaints and diseases are mostly made by the mind. And they were claiming that 80% of the diseases are coming from mind problems. Do you agree on that?
Absolutely, no doubt about that. So increasingly, the idea that illness, sickness is rooted in genetics in a reductionistic bottom-up sense is now changed. So you see the paradigm change is going on, that people think especially the chronic diseases are caused by civilization behavior, by social impact, by the way how we live life. Of course, yes, we have 80%. This is epigenetics, by the way. But to my opinion, when we accept the idea that psychosocial aspects are now more important than biological one with regard to the increase of diseases, we have to change the research designs, because the research designs are made from industry, not from holism.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. Yeah,
thank
you so much. Yeah, good.
Thank you for your question, for your answer. And we have Dr. Suyakshi, who wants to ask a question from the planetary section.
Thank you, Dr. Christian Schubert, for your wonderful presentation. It's nice and very informative. But I have a small question for you. How do thoughts and cortisol relate to the cell-mediated immunity? And you said music and gymnastics can reduce this. Can you please explain it in a little more better way?
Please repeat the question. You questioned the connection between cortisol and inflammation?
Yeah, how do thoughts and cortisol relate to the cell-mediated immunity?
Okay. So yes, we are surrounded by psychosocial occurrences, and they activate specific areas of our brain, of the cortex, limbic system, frontal cortex, and these areas are now connected with the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is the intermediate area connecting the central aspects of our brain with the peripheral aspects of our nervous system. And then the adrenal gland is activated via the hypothalamus and releases cortisol. And cortisol is a very good inflammatory inhibitor. We know it from autoimmune diseases, for example, when sick people get cortisol for relieving autoimmune activity. So it's a very good a drug to decrease the inflammatory situation in the body. For example, when autoimmune patients have flare-ups.
Yeah, my second question is, how do music and gymnastics reduce the inflammatory diseases?
Via these connections. So from a mechanistic standpoint, you can have a negative effect on brain and hypothalamus and the cortisol axis. but you also have the opposite. So you can change the cortisol release in a good sense, so that you decrease the cortisol release via music, and then decrease or increase decrease the sympathetic nerve system, and then decrease the inflammatory system via music. Thank you.
Thank you. One final question from Dirk Silling.
Thank you very much for this enlightening presentation.
Thank you, Dirk.
And I think it is very important, your individual research methodology, to understand that this is the solution for another way how we can implement a scientific approach to say this is working and this is not working, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so how many people do we need to that we have a statistically effect that is that we really can see an effect on a methodology, on a new method or a new drug? So how many people do we need with this individual design?
It's a very good question, and methodologists are discussing that. There are the one who's saying, okay, we need the nomothetic approach, and we need millions, billions of single cases to have nomothetic knowledge. On the other side, there are idiographic researchers. They say we need just one case. Mm-hmm. Think of Freud. We heard a lot of Freud today, and I'm enthusiastic about that. I love that. Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. So it depends on the idea how to approach human beings. So indeed, one case can say everything.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we come to the conclusion of this expert hearing. I thank the members of the panel and all the engaged people who asked their questions. So I think the testimonies and the questions really were an amendment to what we had known so far. And I'm looking forward to get these topics and implementations done into work, into our daily work. So some of us, we know each other from doing this work already. And so we would like to spread the word of this new thought, of this new paradigm. And we need a lot of people who do that. And I would like to encourage you as an expert, as a member of the parliament, as a minister, so that we can spread this word very, let's say, tremendously. We don't have so much time. We need some more pressure to get this word out. So thank you very much for your presentation and what you gave us as a present. Thank you.